Okie doke. So, this is the fourth lesson, and this week we're going to be learning successive breaking of joints. And we're going to learn that through ringing a doorbell. And successive breaking of joints is going to be a very familiar lesson, because it's going to be super close to how pendulums work. But the difference is that a pendulum uses a soft object that can just go and bend in any section of it, where successive breaking of joints deals with actual joints, where it's like it can bend in these locations but not anywhere else. And you could still make really fluid, like wavy, wiggly movements despite having bones that can't bend. And so I'm going to start off with some examples. This one is mine, and this one is my friend Nick's. And so I'll put this on loop. No, show what you're playing. I'm gonna have to find it again, aren't I? It's right here. Just close that. Loop that full screen. And so, basically for this lesson, it shows the arm can still make this fluid movement going up and down despite having solid joints. And mine, if it will play, or do I have to reopen it? Nope, I'm gonna have to reopen it here. So, I'm bad at drawing houses and architecture, so I didn't want to draw an actual door or hallway or just anything that's very architectural, because hard surface things I've never been good at, so I decided to make it a spaceship cavern rather than an actual door from Earth. And that let me make this character, who I still use. Her name is Matt, and she's a space exterminator. But despite having the bones actually solid, she can still easily just have this fluid movement going from here up to here, and that's done solely through successive breaking of joints. And successive breaking of joints can be really easy for some people and really hard for others, and most of the time it's how you go about doing it. When we were learning in Principles of 2D, and I got my assignment done really quickly, people asked me, how did I do it? And I told them, and then they didn't do that, and they complained about how hard it was. Because the way that they did it was, if you just have like a person here, I'm using like the same model that, or the same kind of looking character from the Glen Keane, or not Glen Keane, Richard Williams animation survival guide. They would go in, and if I just copy this to a new layer, make it go all the way down, they would basically go in one frame at, basically just do the entire arm one at a time for each frame, and it would start becoming really inconsistent and too much to keep track of, to go from there all the way up until here. And by the time it actually got up to here, the arm was not the same size as it once was, and people would get frustrated and confused as to why it seems easy for some people and not to others. And the way that I would do it would be, if I make all these the same exposure, there we go, make it end there. Instead of doing it where you draw the entire arm and it slowly starts growing and whatnot, I took a different approach where I had the whole arm in the beginning, but for each frame, well, first I drew out my arcs. Let's see if it's there to there, be here, there to there, it would be here. Connect it with a nice smooth line and make that go till the end. And so, for one, no one ever drew out their arc, so it was hard to keep things a consistent size when they had no idea how big it was supposed to be. But the easiest way to do successive breaking of joints is to break down the joints, where each joint is animated separately, and you can just, if I do this, then this twice. So now that I have this basic motion down of just him raising his arm, I can then go in and start adding the next joint. And because I already know where this is going and where the next joint has been, it's a lot easier to figure out how much drag there should be and what the length of it should be without having to think for too long about it, because you're only focusing on one joint at a time. And so then you would go back again and just finish up with the hand. And the hand's easy because it's just like a little nub. And I'm gonna make these all 2s rather than 3s. Same with this layer. Then make it end there. And also, when you do only one joint at a time or one segment of a joint at a time, you can usually easily see timing errors. Like when I was doing just the first joint, I realized that the spacing was off because it just kind of zoomed out rather than having a nice, like, subtle in between for it. For a nice, easy slow out. And make this go over some. And even though I made it stick up here, normally when one joint hits, so this joint after this, it would start bending back down just slightly. So you can start getting a nice, more relaxed feel to it. Just a little bit more of a slow out. Or slow in, I guess it would be. And this was a lot easier and a lot more accurate than just kind of winging it and drawing the whole arm all at once, especially when you have a more detailed character, because when you break down the object, you can also add in whatever overlapping action there will be, or follow through, or drag. So if they have just like something dangling off their upper arm, you can already have that done and have the timing for that done before you even have to think about the rest of the arm. And so for the actual assignment for the doorbell, the standard character that we got looked a lot like Ichabod Crane from the Disney movie, The Headless Horseman, or Sleepy Hollow, I guess it would be, where it's just like very oval head, long nose kind of character, and I did not want to draw him. I was determined to try and draw as many characters that were just mine as possible, but there are a lot of them because he starts in like the base pose where it's just like one arm's behind his back, and then people would just like animate this hand. So everything else would be perfectly still, but that doesn't really teach you anything about character acting. So for the assignment, you're going to have to show character acting through either or not even character acting as much as motivation for the scene, because you're gonna have to draw the doorbell, and the character. You can add props if you want. You can add whatever type of scenery you want. You can add motions before and after, but the main motion of the hand dragging up and then going down for the actual pressing of the doorbell will have to have the successive breaking of joints, because this is a super important lesson. And so SCAD has two animation professors. Well, they used to have two, now they have more than two, because SCAD's like, you know what'd be great? More students than we can supply teachers for. And then they realized their error and decided to not do that and hire more teachers and keep all the students. But the teacher I had was a character animator. He did characters like Lilo and Mushu and things like that, while the other teacher was an effects animator. He made Simba cry when Mufasa died. He did the chains on Quasimodo. He made Lilo's house blow up. He doesn't teach his class this lesson, so after this class is over, you can tell who is from which class by if they can animate a flag really nicely, or if they can have characters who have really flexible limbs and really animated movements.
Mm-hmm.
Because the effects teacher, while we were doing this assignment, their assignment was to animate a flag, and that was supposed to teach them, well, it was that week as well as when we did the pendulum. It was kind of in between that area. But that was supposed to teach them the whole thing with the S curves and the C curves. But because it was so stressful for so many people to actually learn, uh, a lot of them didn't really learn the lesson, and so they struggled with just the concept of successive breaking of joints and CNS curves. But at the same time, I wish I could animate a flag as fancy as they could. But nope. So this is gonna need a little bit more. So you're going to have your character bring their arm up with successive breaking of joints, down with successive breaking of joints, and have them recoil with successive breaking of joints. If you want to add a movement somewhere in the middle of there, like some of the examples I'm going to be posting on the Google Classroom, will show there's one person who brings the arm like all the way up, but before they actually hit the doorbell, they bring their arm close and do a little finger thing where the fingers go up one at a time and then back down one at a time in a little roll, and
That's cool.
then they push the button. And like for mine, I had my character get scared and then be like, no, I'm gonna do it, and then push the button. You can do that. Um, but as long as they have the whole up down recoil movement, then you're basically good. Let's see what this looks like. Probably still need to add more, but yeah. And then have this slow in. Then one more. Just slow in of everything.
I'm trying to draw the background for my animation here. I don't know if it's gonna look good or not, because I'm not that good at backgrounds.
Yeah, same. That's why I did something that was really organic. And that's what's great about make believe things like aliens and stuff along the lines of that, because no one knows what their stuff looks like. You decide that. If the hallway is wobbly and the doors don't really line up, it's because there's different size aliens and they don't want to be alienist. That's my reasoning for having wonky doors. Also, just the whole uh, horizon. Let me get an actual horizon line and this going out. Then you can just do this and draw a nice frame around it. And get the cutter tool and just I know what I have to do. There we go. And it's like, ta-da! Now I have an environment in which to draw in. Are there any questions so far? Or if I didn't explain anything clearly enough, let me get this out of the way so I can actually see the chat. There we go. Yeah, basically you would have the arm, like the upper arm, go from being straight down to straight up, and then you'd either have it slow in or do like a recoil where it kind of overshoots and settles. But usually when it gets up to the top, it waits a bit because the other segments have to catch up. Because it's like the pendulum where the top part makes it, then the second part makes it, then the bottom part makes it. And I have reference pictures. This one specifically. Let's see if I have Annotate Pro on this computer. No, I don't. I need to figure out how to get that because that is so helpful. But if I just pop this in, yeah, this works. So for this, we see the motion of the pendulum. If I get a new layer, and this is a nice bright color. Make this brush bigger. Where you still have the C curve, the S curve, going into the opposite C curve. There we go. And that works for both noodle arms and arms with actual bend in them, or arms with actual bones in them. So, like, this top row is what we learned when we did the pendulum, with just drag and changing directions when things aren't just like metal. And for this week, it's basically that, but with bones in between the joints. And so, let me get this out, or at least move it over here. Yeah, this is the one that's in the Animator Survival Guide, where you see that first to make an arm go from its side all the way up, first the upper arm makes it, then the lower arm makes it, and then the hand makes it. And the same goes for when it starts going down. And for specifically, oh, there we go. There we go. For specifically this one right here, for this top green one, this one breaks a rule that doesn't happen in things like pendulums, but happens in things like people, where the very end of the chain is going to go back before it goes forward. And the reason that happens is, one, to make a nice, like a smoother arc than before, as well as it just kind of, it has the elbow that can bend on its own. It doesn't need a force to actually bend it. So when you pull your arm down, you can bend your elbow some. And that's just because it can move on its own. It can break that rule of it goes back before it goes forward, that the pendulum could not do. And on a much smaller scale, just like with a hand that's clapping, for the success of breaking of joints, you could even add another layer where you add the finger joints in as well. But it starts at the wrist, and if you had the fingers included in this, the fingers would still be down while the palm is facing diagonally to follow the wrist. And it would just be that 3-part chain again, where it's like the arm, the palm of the hand, and then the fingers. Just like with how the body is for this, and how this person's hand is, where it's the upper arm, lower arm, and hand / also fingers. And this is what I did before I even did my animation itself for the assignment, just to practice it. I did the same method where I just did the lower arm or the upper arms, and then after I did all that and I had good timing, then I added the lower arms, and then I added the hand, and then I added the extra stuff to it. But this was one of the only times I ever animated in Photoshop, and it was dreadful. It was nice to feel like I was drawing rather than just vector stuff. But especially this thing, I'm gonna just make sure I loop things so they go on forever. But specifically this hand over here, this arm over here, was probably the most fun to do because it also had some foreshortening in it. And foreshortening makes a lot of things difficult for a lot of people, where it's either hard to draw for people or it's hard to just figure out how it works in general, not even the drawing phase, even before that, just thinking about how it works. But there's a lot of methods that make foreshortening really simple. One of them is the coil method, and I need an actual pencil. So, if this is just like simple little character, and he's sitting where his legs are out, to actually help visualize what the volume of it is, you can use the coil method. What the animation teacher I didn't have, because he also does a lot of the anatomy classes, he calls it the over-under method. And you just kind of do a coil where it would just be this, but it's easier to be like, okay, so it gets bigger, then it starts turning, and then it goes this way. And you can easily figure out, like, oh, is going in like this sort of pattern. And you can figure out like what's going to go in front of what. And it helps with a lot of things when people have trouble with foreshortening. There's also just looking at reference. That always helps in realizing like the arm is shaped like kind of a cucumber shape with a carrot sort of shape, and then just like a square with hot dogs at the end, and then you have a hand. But this area is thicker than this area, so when you're drawing an arm in foreshortening, make sure you keep this area bigger than this area, because it doesn't matter how close or how like foreshortened it's going to be, this is always going to be bigger than that. Arms and hands are things I swear I can draw.
Hmm.
And just the bicep, or not bicep, the deltoid. Is that the deltoid? The shoulder muscle that's kind of shaped like this from the front and like this from the side. Learning the vague shapes of muscles helps with drawing anatomy as well, because you can just kind of put all those shapes together and make a person really quickly, because it's just like oval with a rectangle, and then it's attached to this diamond that has those weird little dollop things on the sides of them. Then that has a whole cucumber carrot thing on either side. Then there's this weird like sunglasses shape. And these get connected. And this goes up into here. Also just learning what muscles connect to what. And then when you spend time and whatnot on it, instead of just scribbling it out like I am right now, you'll eventually have a very nice looking person that's not off center. Like, oh, this needs to move over that way. But yeah, this was a really quick and simple lesson. That's all you really had to know, is how to make limbs bend and remember CNS curves, how they work, and just learn how to go about doing the assignment. One thing is that a lot of people mess up on that I just remembered I wanted to make sure I covered. If I just hide this and make a new layer there, is that when you have a character that is standing up, when they bend over, it will not, it will not, oh god, there we go. It will not just look like this. For a person to bend over, they need to keep their balance centered, and that means when their upper half goes forward, their lower half is going to go backwards, and that will keep their balance centered. So that's pretty much it for the actual lesson part. So if no one has any questions or anything, we can move on to critiques for last class's assignments.
Hang on. How do I draw like stairs? Like
in perspective or
in perspective, yeah. So like, hang on. I'm gonna send you a.
yeah, send me what you have so far.
Yeah, this is gonna look bad. Okay. Okay. I guess this is good. There we go. Where is it? Oh, here it is. That's what I'm trying.
So you want to have stairs over on this side of it?
Yeah. Stairs where?
Like over here.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right down there.
If you're gonna have the character walk up to the door, I'd be careful because that's also having a walk cycle in perspective, because they're gonna have to go from back here to up here.
Well, I was gonna like move the background like along with them. I guess so like it would kind of like mesh kind of well. But I don't know if I want to do a walk cycle. Like I think I'll just like move the background a little closer.
Yeah. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
This is like...
Yeah. Okay. Oh, hey.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
You.
Huh?
How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You know, the last time I sent you this text message, it was a wrong text message.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Yeah. You realize that?
Yeah.
How's work? Are you still working?
Not right now.
Oh, okay. It was just for the summer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And how's school?
It's pretty good so far.
Pretty good so far? That's good. That's good. Okay. Oh, is somebody calling? You went off, Kevin. You went off?
Did you do that? Oh. I think it just caught.
She'll probably call back, so I'm just gonna wait.
Okay. That was funny.
Mm.
Oh. What's it called?
Kayla said she accidentally hung up on you.
Oh, wait, Karen? Oh. Oh. Okay. I don't know what's going on. But what were you gonna say about
Yeah, just sketching the stairs.
Hmm.
I would probably just do it like this and then erase the parts that would be hidden.
Hmm. I think this looks a little better, but I could be wrong. Well, hang on. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright, wait. Okay, I'll send you another image.
Okie doke.
Thanks.
Yeah, that looks good. So I guess I'll move on to reviewing last week's assignments.
Hmm.
Class A, lesson 3, critique.
Alright, now I'm gonna change the store.
So, Arky, you want to have your critique in class? Okie doke.
This door. I want it to look like old, like the background, like an old kind of decrepit house. He's walking up to.
That might be in the design of the door. They're usually more ornate when they get older.
Mm-hmm.
Arky, is this 12 or 24 frames a second? Okie doke. So I think one of the biggest things here is that there's no overlap. So like and also there's offsetting movements really helps. So like if the head were to go up and then the ears would go up afterwards, like if they were still here and then when the door, or not the door, when the head gets all the way up, then it would get all the way up there, just to have like that extra little amount of movement. And also when you have smearing and arcs, you have to make sure you round off the edges rather than making them straight. Especially when you have one that's going like this, and then the top ones are going like that, because it makes it confusing for the audience who are watching to know exactly which direction the character is going. And also just so the ears would be dragging behind a little bit. Then they would still be dragging a little bit before they get all the way to here, and then once it hits here, then they start going over, but they don't just go up to the rest positions, just stop. You should either have them, if I remember to lock that layer, you can have them go over and have like one start smoothing or slowing into the final position, and have the other one just have a little bit extra movement. And that way you give the character also just a little extra time on the actual emotions themselves. And then if you just have them kind of drag behind. And then once they get to like here, then they will start flopping over. And as these go back up, you can then have the ears start flopping over. I need to make it so this doesn't have smoothing. And redo these ears. Also, make sure that your last frame stays on screen just a little bit longer. Also, anticipation here would help, where it would be either that the muzzle will go down a little bit along with the head, or the eye will close just a little bit more. That way, the animation itself will have that like extra little bump to it and little extra bit of life, and anticipation is there so the audience can, it helps the audience read what's going to happen. So like when someone winds up for a run, or they pull their fist back before they punch, that shows the audience like, oh, they're about to run, or oh, they're about to punch, even if it's just one or two frames. It helps the audience read what's happening so things just don't suddenly happen. And I need to make these delay more. Also, instead of just rotating the head itself, I would have also rotated the neck up and moved the head up a little bit. And also this fur can be played with as well. So when it reaches like all the way over here, this fur will be basically facing all this way. And then when it actually comes to a stop, it will just like kind of fluff itself out. But yeah, just having this be more pushed down because of the speed and just friction pushing up against it will help add more believability to it. So just like, I guess the main thing would be just make sure things drag and make sure things don't just come to a stop. And that will instantly just help, like, everything looks so much, like, more full of life. And Silver, did you put your animation into Google Classroom?
No, I did not. Hang on. Yeah, I guess I could put it in now. So, there it is. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fix it up like you told me to.
No worries. Yeah, it's mostly just arcs. And also you want to avoid having the character face directly towards screen, because that means that there's nothing dragging or nothing leading, the whole face is just rotating.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of this frame, if it was more like, let me get another color. Yeah.
So basically, like, move it off kind of to the side, in a way.
Yeah. And also when something that has like rabbit ears rotates, these two are going to try and stay in place. So when this starts to turn, then there we go. When that turns to like this direction, these are going to try and stay in place. So let's see. So they're going to be offset a little bit before they actually get into just their resting place. Yeah, and also having arcs. Because the path of the characters basically it goes up, looks this way, then it goes straight across this way.
Yeah.
So when the character goes across, it should go in this sort of pattern.
Down, and then.
Yeah, either like down and around, or it can do an over arc. Let me get my one friend's head turned because he had a character who kind of started facing front, and we called him Nalto because it was like Balto but not. Loop full screen. And this is an example of it going like up and over rather than just like the normal down and under. And that's always really nice. And you can see he's drawn out his arcs.
Alright, I need to look up some doorbells. Because.
Yeah.
Does it actually have to have like a doorbell sound to it, or?
It doesn't have to, but finding a doorbell sound isn't too hard to find. There's websites like gosh, what's the one that I used all the time back in the day? Was it this one? Yeah, freesound.org. You have to have an account to actually download stuff, but the account's free. But they have a bunch of good sound effects.
I guess that works. Is it alright if I have like a perspective shot of me like ringing the doorbell?
It has to be either 3/4 or a profile view, so you get the full like lesson of having them do the doorbell. So during them actually ringing the doorbell, I probably wouldn't have it in perspective too much. You could do it before or after, but just so you can get the hang of excessive breaking of joints, I'd have it pretty much 3/4 or perfectly side view. There is this one girl at SCAD who is probably the person that I liked the least from that school. Well, the female I liked the least. The male I liked the least was racist and mean and is not just like, oh, I feel like he's racist. No, he straight up said he was. And he was fine with that, and that made me even more upset. But anyways, the girl, she didn't listen, like, ever. And, like, I would always visit the principals at 2D classrooms, and the teacher would be like, if you need help, ask her. And I'd be like, hey, everybody. And so I'd be taking notes in the class so I knew, like, whatever changed from quarter to quarter. And for the doorbell assignment, he said at least 20 times that it had to be 3/4 or a side view. But this girl, her name was Isabella, she had her character facing completely away from camera, and they did not even do successive breaking of joints. It was just like a character. She had like hair and like a dress, and she was facing the door, and her hand just kind of awkwardly kind of just went like that, and then the door opened and she got startled and fell over, and it was choppy and weird. And I kept telling her the entire time when she kept asking me for critique and whatnot, I kept telling her it couldn't be from just a back view, he said in class, and she's like, he never said that. And so when it came time for her to get her critique in class, the first thing he said was, why is it facing back? I asked you for 3/4 or a profile view. And she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. I didn't know we had to do that. And I was just smiling in the back of the classroom because I'm like, I told you. But yep. That basically wraps it up for class. So, I already have the assignment sheet on the Google Classroom, and I'm about to post all the examples that I have. I went through a bunch of them because a lot of them aren't good, and it's just like they're like one joint moves, and it's like, that's not ringing a doorbell. That's a robot. And so I'll post all the ones that I found that actually met all the requirements, and they're all from the same class that I took, so they're all basically exactly what we're looking for, and some of them are real funny. But yeah, those will be posted after I sign off and get some dinner and then come back. But I will see you guys next week. I'm gonna end the recording.